Hello, I'm the Media Wiz, because one art form wasn't enough, and we're back at it again with another vlog video. So, as I mentioned at the end of the last video I did, I was going to be talking about Russell Crowe's album, and I made it very clear that I was not looking forward to it, because Russell Crowe's singing in Les Mis, not a fan. Not a fan. I liked the Les Mis movie. I even think that his acting, while over the top, I thought he was pretty good in it. His singing... But anyway, so this is going to be less talking about the album itself because the album only has 7 songs. None of the songs had lyric pages on websites like Genius and stuff like that. So there really wasn't a whole lot to analyze lyrically. Even if I did have the lyrics like written up, there really wasn't a whole lot to say about the lyrics in the songs. And it's not a very long album. It's an EP. It's only 7 tracks. And the name of the album is Backtracks. It came out in either 2008 or 2009. I've heard conflicting answers in terms of that. Like a bunch of different websites that list the album listed as either 2008 or 2009. But yeah, so I guess I should talk a little bit about how I came to hearing about this album and wanting to do a video on it. Along with Russell Crowe's singing in Les Mis, and a couple of other movies and a couple of other projects where Russell Crowe has shown interest in singing. The main thing that made me want to check this out was last year I was going through a bunch of old South Park audio commentaries from Trey Parker and Matt Stone, and it was the season 6 episode, the new Terrence and Phillip movie trailer. It's the episode that got very popular because it parodied Russell Crowe. And, you know, Russell Crowe fighting around the world. So while I was listening to the audio commentaries for that season and it got to that episode, they mentioned that they actually got to meet Russell Crowe. And they go into this whole very interesting story. I highly recommend, if you're interested in South Park and haven't listened to any of like the commentary mini tracks that Trey and Matt have done, highly recommend looking them up. They're on YouTube. And they only do like 5 minutes of an episode. They themselves don't like talking over whole episodes. But anyway, so they were mentioning that they were invited to listen to an album that Russell Crowe was working on, and this episode came out in like 2002, I want to say. It was very early. It was very early 2000s, but this made me think like, oh wait, so Russell Crowe did release an album, but this is apparently not the album. This is made up of songs from years before, so that took me down a very minor rabbit hole of Russell Crowe when he was younger. I will say this, these 7 songs, like all these songs that were released in like 1982, or at least recorded in 1982, these sound way better than all the stuff that they were describing on that Russell Crowe album that may or may not have been released. You know, apparently there was a interpretive hand clapping throughout the chorus of a song, and Trey Parker mentioned that that wasn't a very good idea musically, and then I guess Russell Crowe got really defensive about it. And after that, they said they were never invited to celebrity parties like that ever again. But apparently Russell Crowe is a good sport. He actually liked the episode they made where they parodied him, and he apparently liked Team America. So, you know what? At least Russell Crowe was a good sport. He's one of the few people parodied on South Park who actually liked his appearance. So what I'm trying to say is, this album, for any kind of shortcomings it might have, it seems like it would have been way better than whatever that album that Russell Crowe was working on at the time that may or may not have been released. Like, every time I tried looking for whatever album they were talking about, I couldn't find it. Maybe it's like a personalized thing that he passed out to some of his friends and he didn't release it to the public. I don't know. He'd rather save his singing talent for Les Mis. But like I mentioned, this album, despite coming out in 2009, is made up of songs that he recorded in 1982. And it was part of this band that Russell Crowe was a part of when he was a teenager in Australia. And the name of the band was Russ, Le Rock and the Romantics. And it has a very 80s Australian rock kind of sound to it. It sounds like kind of a hodgepodge of a bunch of different rock songs from like the 50s to the 70s. I'm assuming that a lot of their catalog kind of sounded like that because a lot of songs that were on this album definitely sounded like that. The biggest 2 hits that came from this album, as far as I can tell, the 2 big hits, there's one called Fire, and there's one called I Just Want to Be Like Marlon Brando. And, well, that's the very first song on the album, I Just Want to Be Like Marlon Brando. and it sounds an awful lot like a Johnny Cash song. And right away, I noticed that there are a lot of songs on this album that sound like Russell Crowe took a lot of influence from other artists. There's a lot of songs on here that sound like the kind of Beach Boys, beach rock of the 50s. There's kind of Vietnam era, darker, moodier sounding rock songs from like the 70s. There's some experimental kind of hippie rock in here that kind of sound like Davy Jones and the Monkees, and even a little bit of Tom Jones, even though he doesn't really fall into that category. But there's like some Tom Jones sounding tracks in here. The song after that is a breakup song, as far as I can tell, and it's called It Hurts So Bad. And that's one of the songs that sounds very like Elvis-y. Like it has a very kind of 50s or 60s Elvis sound to it. Like, just even down to the way he sings, it sounds like he's trying to fluctuate different singing styles and trying to emulate those artists. So there's a lot of that kind of like Elvis, oh yeah, you guys sound real low like this. And I was just kind of like, throughout this whole album, I was just like fascinated by it. It's like, I can't even really say like, oh, this is some of the worst crap I've ever heard, but I was just still just like, I'm fascinated by how weird this album is. It really is just a hodgepodge of a bunch of different types of songs. I mean, you go from I Just Want to Be Marlon Brando, which is basically a song talking about how he wants to grow up to become, the coolest cat in town, essentially, like Marlon Brando was. Even though I guess maybe back then people didn't know behind the scenes Marlon Brando was a dick, but at the time everyone thought Marlon Brando was just so cool. So, you want to make a song about wanting to be that guy, wanting to be that cool. And then the song after that's like this breakup song. I find it funny that the song that sounds like a breakup song is immediately followed by Never Let You Slide, which is basically a song about like, oh girl, I'm gonna make you mine. Oh girl, you're the one I love. It's that kind of song. It's basically a romance song. And it sounds like one of those kind of Beach Boys songs. They even have like the piano sliding key sounds at one point. And it has that kind of like late 50s, early 60s, like beach blanket bingo kind of sound to it. This amalgamation of just a bunch of different sounding songs from a bunch of different periods through time. Case in point, the song after that, Fire, which sounds kind of like a 80s David Byrne kind of like Talking Heads type of new wave song. It has more of like a synth sound to it. It sounds more like alternative, and it sounds drastically different from the song right before it. And like I said, the lyrics, they're not great, but they're better than the lyrics on Shaq Fu. You got to give it that. Russell Crowe's singing on this album isn't even that bad, but there's just plenty of times where it sounds like he's trying not to be himself, which may or may not be a good thing depending on what you think of his singing voice. But there are just so many times where it's like, all right, now he's channeling Elvis. Now he's channeling Johnny Cash. Now he's trying to channel the Beach Boys. And I try, and I try, and I try. Not gonna lie though, Fire, for trying to sound like one of those 80s alternative new wave kind of sounding songs, not bad. I can easily see why Fire was one of the bigger songs off of this album. I Just Want to Be Like Marlon Brando. I can see why that got popular, kind of, just based on the fact that it's named after a popular person. Although, me personally, if I were to say my personal favorite songs, a lot of my favorite songs were closer to the end of the album. After that, we get a song called St. Kilda, or Kilda. I forget how it's pronounced, but this song definitely sounds more like a post-Vietnam 70s kind of song. It has more of a dark sound to it. Not in the same way that the kind of early metal influence of something like Black Sabbath or like The Doors, where it's a lot heavier and like moodier, and we got like the sounds of rain and thunder backing the instrumental. Nothing like that, but it definitely sounds more like a Vietnam era kind of song. It just has like that particular sound to it. And it kind of goes through a lot of different cultural landmarks. There's funny enough, one of the lyrics I did pick up on is there's a lyric in there referencing playing Space Invader. I was like, okay, that's one of the sillier sounding lyrics, but it doesn't seem like it's a song that's 100% taking itself that seriously. The same can be said for the song after that, which is Pier 13, which definitely has a way heavier sounding beat to it. I think my absolute favorite part of the song is the drums. I really liked the percussion in this one. The drum solo on that song in particular, I was like, okay, all right, I'm starting to feel it. This is good. This is really good. The instrumental alone, I would say Pier 13 is probably one of my favorite tracks off of this album. I really liked the drum portion especially. That was definitely a part that got me. And then finally you end on one of the lighter songs. You end on So You Made It Now, which has this more triumphant kind of sound to it. I mean, instrumentally it sounds like another Beach Boys, like beach rock 50s kind of sounding song. It's a fine enough song to end on. It's upbeat, it's catchy, it has a nice tone and a nice theme to it of, you know, oh, so now you made it. Look, you finally achieved everything you wanted. And considering Russell Crowe went on to become a famous actor after this, I guess that's something. It's like, I guess you could say, so he made it now. So this album is certainly a little bit trickier to talk about compared to something like Shaq Fu. Shaq Fu was very easy to talk about just based on how weird the whole thing is, like a basketball player trying to do rap. This album, on the other hand, you can definitely tell that Russell Crowe wanted to be a musician first, and then he kind of fell into becoming an actor after that. There's a bunch of stories of actors that tried being musicians. I mean, you know, you got Bruce Willis. Bruce Willis tried having a music career, and he also got to sing in a couple of movies after that. I mean, he did a song for Rugrats Go Wild. There's John Travolta. John Travolta tried a music career, which, granted, he also kind of broke out with Grease, which is a musical, so that makes sense. But then you see the kind of like rip-off Donny Osmond music he was making, you're like, it's easy to see why he's stuck to acting. Even Eddie Murphy had tried a music career until he eventually was like, all right, yeah, music's just kind of a side thing. And once again, he got to sing in movies after that. You know, there's a bunch of Eddie Murphy singing. I think he did like 2 or 3 albums. There's one where he got to feature with Michael Jackson, so there's that. But yeah, Eddie Murphy, like a lot of these guys, just kind of was like, all right, I'm just going to stick to the more lucrative acting career. And music, that could just be a little side project, and who knows, maybe every once in a while I get to sing in a movie or a show that I'm in. I like hearing a person who would eventually go on to be known for a different profession like acting, and then hearing their early days. Like, this is definitely more young man Russell Crowe, and seeing this kind of like era of him trying to emulate the rock acts that he probably listened to, and a lot of the artists that definitely left a mark on rock history from its, you know, sort of its inception of the 50s to around that time of the late 70s going into the 80s. I did like that part of it. That whole part of the album is interesting. The songs themselves, I think you can pick and choose which ones you like and which ones you don't. I can see why Fire was certainly one of the bigger hits off of the album. It seems like that one, if you look up that song, that seems to have a decent number of hits on YouTube. But personally, my favorite song out of everything on the album was Pier 13. Anybody interested in checking out this album, feel free to let me know what you thought of it if you ended up listening to it or some of the songs off of it. As for what to expect next time, I am going to be doing one more album review from somebody who is not technically a musician, but they dip their toes into doing music. We're going to be talking about the album Songs for Dust Mites from Steve Burns from Blue's Clues. So yeah, after he left Blue's Clues' initial run, he then did a bunch of acting roles for serious shows like crime shows and Law and Order and stuff like that. And then he also tried his hand at a music career. So we'll see what that's like next time. But until then, I'm the Media Wiz, because one art form wasn't enough.